Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Seeds of Triumph podcast. We are all about helping service members navigate through the difficult and challenging experiences that come with serving in the military. Here on Seeds of Triumph, we will discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly, as well as provide several resources, techniques, and coping mechanisms that can be used every day to instill overall toughness, wellness, and resiliency into our military force. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy what we have to provide. Welcome to the Seeds of Triumph podcast. Today we will be talking about the impact that leadership can have on mental health, as well as the access to mental health care. Today's guest is 20-plus year retired Master Chief and the Don't Give Up the Ship podcast host. Hello, DGUTS
What's
host.
Up?
Yeah,
How
go
we
ahead
doing?
and introduce yourself to those who
DGUTS
don't
is
know
fine.
about you.
We were just talking about how weird it is to not call me by my name, but I don't know. I'm not letting it go until I absolutely have to. When I get Joe Rogan famous, if that ever happens, or at least like on Navy levels, Joe Rogan famous, maybe I'll start using my name. But yeah. So like you said it. It's a pretty. I would imagine for the audience, because we publish this on my platform as well, that like they kind of know my background mostly. But I was a submariner, 21 years, retired in September. Long and adventurous career, I guess. But I went on the adventure of the DGUTS podcast platform thing based on a frustration of what I was seeing as an A school. I was an A school instructor and a chief at the A school, and then I became the SEL, and we had a lot of students like reaching back, asking for help with leadership development. And then that led to a bunch of other like issues that have arisen over the time I've been doing it, where we've just recognized these gaps where the Navy's not providing the robust leadership development and education that sailors deserve, and what can we do about that? Because like you going through the entire life cycle of a career until you're a chief or a senior chief and then ending up at the senior enlisted academy is not the answer. And like you can say, oh, but this, oh, but that, like, and like ELD, and it's like that's not a thing that's answering the question, at least right now. Maybe I'll be proven wrong in 5 years, and I hope I am, but here we are. So and then that kind of evolved into like where I was aiming it at junior sailors. Then it evolved to just everyone and a lot of leadership engaging, which makes sense, but that's not who I was aiming at initially. And it turned out I had more like board eligible first classes and like chiefs and senior chiefs listening than anyone else, which turned out to be a good thing, because those are they need the stuff just as much as anyone else. And I was looking at it more like, let me start at the beginning. And help these kids that just don't know what to do. And then I recognize, well, they don't know what to do because the leadership incompetence that exists above them, because they've never been taught what to do either. And then it's just this doom cycle of like the blind leading the blind. And we end up with, extremely stressed out sailors with acute mental health issues, including me, by the way. And we can talk about that too. But like the last 6 months of my career, I was on limb due for mental health. And, like some of that was like external, but a lot of it like I was already seeing a therapist, and I was already dealing with an anxiety and insomnia issue when some other stuff happened. But yeah, it's just I recognize that as a gigantic issue, and everything. Arguably, I'm sure somebody could dream up an example where it's like, okay, maybe not that, but like everything that sailors complain about on meme sites and on Reddit and everywhere that they have an outlet, is you can trace it back to failed, like leadership failure, just leadership incompetence.
And I'm sure over the years, you've seen it evolve, right? Because now we have Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and now Reddit. And the thing that has evolved within even just the last couple of years is now there's the anonymity factor, right? So you can go on and be anonymous on these Facebook groups and like really share the raw truth about what is going on. And some of that stuff is just wild. Like it's
There's a really great Facebook group. I don't know if they're still active, but they were called Saving Sailors. I imagine they still are. And it was a guest I had on that was her name was and I always kind of butcher her name, but it's Beata Batista. She runs a platform that, and again, like I don't know how active she is still doing that, but I know she's still on the social media account because I see that all the time. It's called To Go Ashore. And it was the design was, she did a podcast for a little bit, and I think that kind of fell off because she's busy with work and she's a single mom. But then her idea was to try to set up a platform to assist sailors with transitioning out of the military because she didn't think there was enough resources. And that was kind of like just another one of the things we're failing at as an organization. So she was going to do that. And then she introduced me to, it was a submariner chief that's originally started it with just a post. And then based on the post going viral, he like created this group, and you can kind of go there, share your story, and like get dialogue with other people that have gone through similar things and stuff. And it's really cool that those types of things exist, and we have those tools like social media to do that. But then also, like, you could make an argument that we just weren't perceiving them on the same level that we are now because of all those tools, right? Like everybody has a mechanism to express where they're at and how they're doing that they didn't. Because like when I was where you're at in your career, it was MySpace, and I was organizing my top 8. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
God, cringing just thinking about it. But like that's what it was, and it was like that wasn't you didn't have the type of functionality or ability to like communicate and reach out quite like we do. I mean, now it's just, good God. I mean, you could get an itch that you need to scratch and the whole world finds out about it. Like, because there's just so many ways to do that. But I think there's a lot of really positive things that come from it for sure. But I also think it can exacerbate it quite a bit. Like I've noticed for me personally, my anxiety is not like I have to filter what I take in. If that, like, I have to curate what I'm consuming. Like, so my wife likes to watch like reels and just like all this crap on the internet, and she'll find something wild and want to show me. And I'm like, what is it? And sometimes she gets kind of frustrated because she just wants to show me what she thinks is funny. And it's like, okay, great. I'm not trying to watch like some 2 drunk chicks fighting in a casino. Like it bothers me. Like it really does. Like and I just have noticed like the things that I can consume that don't affect me. And then there's things I can consume that do. And I'm just like, I'm not interested in anything that's going to like, bother me in that way. And it's like mostly just mindless crap that I don't want anything to do with anyway. So yeah, I don't know. Like I've noticed I personally have to curate like what I'm taking in from these platforms, even though there's a lot of good to be had as well.
100%. Yeah. I started listening to your podcast maybe about a year ago, and I stumbled upon it because I was like, I was desperately seeking out leadership books, leadership material. And it's not that I didn't have people at my command that I trusted that I could talk to, because there was a few, that I could look to for advice. But I was kind of looking also for more of like a professional, right, type guidance.
The way that I express it is competence. Like, you are seeking leadership competence. You want to understand the nuts and bolts. How does it work? What are the mechanisms I can use to be better, do better, take the best care of my people I possibly can? And
exactly.
And when I've started like beating the drum for this phrase I've adopted of leadership and competence, which I totally stole from a book called The Peter Principle, and I highly recommend everyone read it. It's kind of comedic, but also not. It was written by I think I don't remember if he's a psychologist or what his actual profession was, but he did a really interesting book in how hierarchies work. And it's just the incompetence I see in leadership. And when I say it, I don't mean it as like any kind of an insult. There are a ton of amazing people in the military. And I'm sure at every command, you can go find good people that are in those positions that will even like desperately want to help you, but they don't have the tools. They've never been given the tools to do it correctly. And so what you run into is a lot of just like the end users of their leadership, because they get promoted to leadership positions that they're not equipped or ready for. God, my nose is like, I'm sorry. I'm super cancer nose. it gets itchy randomly. And then I got like schwacked in the face at jujitsu the other day. So it's sore. So I can't even like itch it properly because I feel like I got punched in the face. The leadership competence that we see it, like the end users of that leadership get extremely frustrated and pissed off, and rightfully so, because whether or not it's intended that way, and the vast majority of the time in my experience, it's not intended negatively. It's just, it's inept, incompetent attempts at helping people without having the tools. The sailors on the receiving end take it as, you're not a good person, you're out to get me, you're a terrible leader, which, I mean, that one is almost objectively true. Like it's misunderstood a lot of the times in my opinion, and they don't even know they're like how to communicate what's going on there, because, and I've had chiefs in the Chiefs mess face in their hands, just melting down because they want to help their divisions, but they don't know how. Like, they're good people and they want to do a good job and take care of the people, and they genuinely care about them, but they can't get through to them. They can't get them to trust them. They can't get them to be receptive to any type of communication. They don't trust their chief. They don't believe he's out like about their best interest. And when you talk to those sailors, which I used to do all the time because I was curious, I'd go up to the kids in those divisions and be like, hey, what is going on? Like, and they would explain it to me, and he's an adversary. Like, that chief is terrible. We don't trust him. And he did some brain dead things. Don't get me wrong, but it's like, it was incompetence. It wasn't like malicious. Like, he wasn't doing it because he's evil. And it's like, there's probably like 0.01% of people that can end up in that position that actually are evil. Like, I've heard those stories too, but across the board, generally what you're dealing with is people who genuinely want to do a good job and they want to help. And there's all kinds of other components of how when you're in those positions, you get overwhelmed with, not like, a large component of it is that unrecognized incompetence. Like, the job is way harder than it should be because you have no idea what you're doing. And because it's not your fault entirely, it's like 90% on the institution in the way I look at it, because they never trained and qualified you for the position that they elevated you to. And that's negligent.
It's kind of like that fight or flight response, right? It's like, either you're going to find yourself in this position that you've never been prepared for, and you're going to fight through it and, get the tools and the resources and seek out the help that you need on your own. Or you're just going to take the flight response and run away with it and just try to keep your head above water and do what you can.
Right. I just got, let me grab it really quick because it just happens to be sitting here. I just finished listening to it, but I got the book itself too. It's called The Tools. It's there's a really cool documentary about this therapist. His name is Phil Stutz. And then the book he wrote with a guy named Barry Michaels, but the thing on Netflix is called Stutz. It's Stutz.
Yeah, that's really what amazing. I thought of when you said that.
Yep. It's a documentary. Jonah Hill was Jonah Hill's therapist, right? So he did a documentary with it where he shared all these tools because he's like, I've been in therapy for a long time. I've never experienced anything like this before. And it really, really helped me. And Phil Stutz has Parkinson's and a bunch of others. He's pretty old. So like, he wanted to like get the ideas out there. But then I found that he had books as well. And the ideas he has are incredible, but one of the ones I just listened to the other day as I was finishing the audiobook was he was talking about how people commonly freeze when they get like scared, intimidated, have like high levels of social anxiety, whatever. And so and it's kind of like in that fight or flight vein, but they just freeze up. And so like in lieu of doing something, they just do nothing. And you see that happen a lot from leadership people because they're afraid to be the one that makes the wrong decision. So they just don't make decisions. And that's equally as harmful for the end users at leadership. But then again, it's like this weird doom cycle of like these people get promoted to past their level of competence, and then they end up in a position where they don't even know what they're doing is wrong. And what I was talking to that nuke electrician about earlier was like, he told me that there was an episode where I kind of first told the story about when I was an LPO and I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do with my hands. And so I regressed to my lowest level of training, which was just nothing, like what I saw happen to me. And I started mimicking that unconsciously. Like, I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was just screaming all the time. And then one day I saw my whole division glaze over like at 30 seconds in. And I was just like, I just stopped and looked at him like, oh, you guys aren't even listening to me. Like this isn't working. And I just stopped, walked out. Like they were all stunned because they're just like, oh my God, he's losing it. But like, I'm like, this isn't working and I need to go reevaluate my whole life. Like, cause this is broken. And I had always told myself I would never do it because I hated it when it happened to me and blah, blah, blah. So like talking like existential crisis. So I was like freaking out. But yeah, you freeze and then it's like you don't have the awareness to even know that you're doing it wrong. It's so bizarre. And then you're freezing and or running away from your responsibilities.
It's kind of like, it's like a trial, right? And it's crazy because the end users, right, they get hurt as you try new things and it's not the right way. Well, people are on the other end of that. So that's kind of like the terrible part of it too. And not all leaders are bad, right? But and some of us do figure it out. Some of us seek out extra help.
Yeah, I don't think bad's the right word because it implies evil. Like
incompetent. You're right.
Incompetent is I try to stick with that because it's like it's not their fault. Like it really isn't. Like I mean, if you make it to Master Chief, you've never cracked a book. Okay, we've got a personal accountability conversation to have. But like it as a new chief or like an LPO, like I don't expect you to. And then they're getting validated by promotions and awards and positions along as they go. So then it's like they transition from like this confusion and just not knowing to, oh, well, I must be doing it right, And then there are a lot of like chiefs that are at the end of a career, or like I would say probably like senior chiefs, master chiefs that get to an end of a career and think that they're like these leadership scholars just because they did a 20-year career in the military. And it's like, actually, like you should really study more because if you did, like, and it's not like there's not those people too. Like I'm not the only person that has studied the stuff and that like goes down the rabbit hole. Like there's plenty.
Yeah, many of your guests do, and you provide extremely valuable content for people like myself and other, LPOs and first classes who are looking for training, resources, and mentorship to get that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. You want to talk about the mental health part since this is a mental health podcast?
No, yeah. So you talk and advocate and you know a lot about leadership and you have a lot of experience with leadership or lack thereof. And so I think that you can provide a really good perspective on how leadership, good or incompetent, right, can impact a sailor or a service member's career. Like explain how much of an influence and an impact that leadership really does have.
Yeah, it's another unrecognized like I'm trying to think of the best word for it. Like it's another unrecognized problem that we have where I think the lion's share of what we like as an organization, like the military evaluate to be acute mental health issues. So like, I'm not a mental health professional, but the mental health professionals that are diagnosing them and tracking them and whatever, right? Like I've been all up in those studies about like the suicide statistics and the mental health issues and all that kind of stuff. I don't think there's a recognition of like, okay, we have this spike in suicides. We have this spike in acute mental health issues. So they're like, okay, well, we got to do something about this. Let's increase access to resources. Let's battle against the stigma of accessing mental health care. Let's make it okay for you to seek it out or like alternative methods, even like the chaplain and everything else. But what they don't do is like, which I think is insane because so often I've sat in critiques where something goes wrong during a procedure on a nuclear submarine and they're in the documentation for the critique, they're looking for like root cause analysis. Like, yeah, okay, this went wrong, but what really like what caused it to go wrong? And then you trace it back all the way to the beginning and you're like, okay, that's the thing we need to fix so that we can't even get to this point, let alone have all the other 3 failures that allowed us to get to this point or whatever. So I don't think that's happening. I don't think people in the positions to really affect institutional change even recognize that leadership and competence is and this is again in my analysis the biggest problem we have. I think if we went after solving leadership development and education and just like trying to like start a life cycle and then breed out leadership and competence to the maximum extent possible, it'll never go away, right? It's not like we're going to be perfect, but we could do a hell of a lot better than we're doing. And just it's one of those like you got to actively work on it constantly, because
I just thought of something like the Air Force, the Army, the Marines. They all have institutionalized leadership schools. And I had a conversation, with an Air Force E6 because I work at a joint environment just the other day. And he was talking to me about all these leadership principles and all this stuff that he learned as an E4. And I was like, wow, that's
Airman Leader Program.
Yeah. I was like, that's really awesome. And so I'd really be curious. I mean, there's also, other factors like the Navy's out to sea and, based off the different branches, we're responsible for doing different things. But I'd be curious to line up like the mental health statistics along with the leadership and see if there's any correlation amongst the branches there.
And you would have to evaluate how good of a job the Air Force is doing with the Airman Leader Program as well, because I bet you if you went and talked to a lot of Air Force NCOs, they'd probably tell you it's not that great. It's a hell of a lot better than nothing. But again, it's like, and it probably is like, maybe it's preventing 10% of the problems that we have. Maybe it's preventing 15 or 20. That's a huge deal. And that doesn't mean that the NCOs that go through it are going to like provide positive feedback. Like they might think it still sucks and they could do way better. And I don't know. I have no visibility on that at all. But like the excuses that we get from leadership on why we don't have it, I think are just garbage, because the Army deploys plenty and the Army has NCO academies at every, like the major installations. They have like a home training installation for each MOS, which is like our rating specialties or whatever. And so like when I was an instructor at the A school, we were on the logistics and ordnance base. And they had an NCO academy there. My friend Yada taught there. Like they had a brick and mortar, Moose, hush child. I'm doing something. They had a brick and mortar NCO academy, and there were requirements to go there. Like, and not like prereq requirements, even though I'm sure those are real, but like you had to go there at certain points in your career. And I don't know exactly when or what their metrics are, but it was like linked to promotion. Like you had to do, as you progress, you had to do a certain level of leadership development and education, because of course you do. And here we are, like, you know what I mean? Like I was just talking earlier about how we deleted PSDs and just figure it out, nerds. And it's just like, that's another example of like a huge stressor that is a catastrophic failure in leadership. That, I mean, your acute mental health issues. Like one of the things I freaked out about the MCPON AMA was there was a sailor that had gotten out. I believe they were retired. They were retired somehow. It sounded like medical, but I'm not positive. But they put it in the thing.
He said he was homeless.
He said he was homeless, and their first response was like, "Let us know if we can help you get your retirement orders that are no longer
get your orders."
Like, how about can he get an apartment? Like, maybe let's focus on a roof and like somewhere to sleep. And he didn't expound on whether or not he had solved those issues. But like, good God, your first concern is let me get you this piece of superfluous admin. So yeah, it's just. I think that leadership and competence leads to just immeasurable stress on the end users of that leadership, which is E6 and below, you know, like, and it's not to say like, again, and we can get into it later when we get to my seat of triumph. I'm so excited. When we get to that part, we can get to like my experience. But at the higher levels, it happens too, because these leaders, just like the junior sailors, are under this incredible burden, not just from incompetent leadership, but from like just what the stuff that's static, like the stuff that is just part of what we do here that's already hard and stressful, right? Like our mission requirements are already hard and stressful. Our op tempos, are like, you guys go into a basement and do all this crazy creepy things you can't talk about with anybody, and like there's all this wild stuff that happens that is already difficult and stressful and provides me with anxiety and insomnia and all these other things. So I already am doing this like job that is unfathomable to most civilians. So you already have like this really abnormal level of stress. And then we're like, oh, wait, we're not done. Hold my beer. And they like leadership incompetence piles on, and it's just exponential. And then all of these things that like they're burdened, like we come out with all these administrative requirements and all these programs and the good idea fairy and wherever these nav admins are coming from, just dropping all these new and exciting requirements and programs and stupidity on you, to the point where it's like, you don't have time to do anything. Like, except be stressed out and like get not enough sleep.
What's crazy is that, like, for example, I work my job, right? I say but I'm talking about your typical E3, E4, E5, right? You're doing your job, you're dealing with the day-to-day stresses, you want to go home for the day. But like you said, now we have all these other requirements that we have to get through, like training or updating InFast or going to watch or just doing all these other things. And so you have the leader, right, your first line leader, and I always put that position on the LPO to kind of have your back and make sure that you're okay and taken care of. But a lot of the LPOs they either don't feel empowered, or they don't think that the right thing to do is to put it off and save it, right? They think the right thing to do is
get it all done today.
And they don't realize, they don't realize 100%. That the sailor is suffering because of it. And so, like, I just had a conversation with another first class the other day about that. And I had to tell him, like, look, at the end of the day, like, we have to prioritize. And sailors' pay, sailors' career, and sailors' safety are the three things that should be prioritized, not their training, not their InFast. That can wait another day.
Well,
we cannot.
There's a push and pull with mission requirements, because like when you say training, I think you're talking about like
no, I'm
NKOs,
talking about like a GMT,
right? Like guard stuff that doesn't really matter that much,
exactly.
But yeah, I like. And I also, to your point a second ago, like I think a lot of times the LPOs in those positions do know that they shouldn't, like, this isn't the right answer necessarily. But like I as a senior chief, department chief on a submarine, I was in positions where I'm like, this isn't what we need to be doing right now. And I've even been in meetings where like the entire chief's mess is like telling the triad, like, don't do this. Like we were in a place where like, the crew hadn't had any sleep. We had been drilling and killing and getting ready for inspection. And then, oh my God, a security drill requirement hadn't been met. And so like, we're just like, this can wait, or waive it or whatever. Like the crew was like run ragged. They all needed sleep, including the chiefs. And we're just like, this is dangerous. Like, we're trying to operate the submarine safely, which is always trying to kill us, like all the time. So we need to be alert and like prepared to do that. But on top of that, you're demanding all these other things of us. And it's like, to be clear, I was on a ballistic missile submarine whose real mission is like, it's nuclear deterrence, which nuclear deterrence manifests itself as punching holes in the ocean, going 5 knots to nowhere for long periods of time, just in case World War III breaks out. So do we really need to do all these drills all week, every week for the entire time we're out? Like, so there's a lot of leeway, but it's like these commanding officers are terrified of complacency, and they're terrified of any reportable metrics slipping, because they want to be full bird captains when they grow up, and potentially flag officers. So it's like you just get this weird, I don't know, like inability to like let things fall off the plate. Like, some stuff's not important when you're operating a nuclear submarine at sea. It's just not, like,
and that's why we have to get on the same page with our priorities. And in your case, in that example, is the safety of your crew. Like, that is way more important than a check in the box, this metric. Like,
but they don't a lot. And some of this is probably unique to submarines, but like some of it's not, where they're more worried about what upper echelon commanders are going to think or what they're going to say in their email that they send or the nastygram they get than they are about sailor safety and sailor quality of life.
And they probably don't even see it like that, to be honest.
They don't.
They probably don't. Yeah, it's not on purpose.
I don't think that's how they're measuring it at all. I just think that they get caught up and like, they're like, no, we have to do this. It's too important. Oh my God. And they just get tunnel vision, and they're not recognizing the strain it's having on the people that are responsible with actually making the thing happen. But then also, a lot of times you get people that just kind of forget what it's like, or chalk it up to, oh yeah, it was hard when I was junior too. Shut up. Like it, and okay, yeah, it was hard when I was a junior sailor. It was like mind-bendingly difficult, but also there was a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on today that was not going on in 2002. Like when I was on a submarine as a second class, all I did was wake up, stand 12 hours a galley watch captain, get off watch, go work out like I was in prison, eat, go back to sleep. Like that's my routine. It was like prison. Like, but I didn't have collateral duties. I didn't have any other demands on my time. It was hard enough to do what I was doing, but I mean, I was getting, like, especially once I was like qualified, because like you get in your submarine dolphins is a thing. Like you're not sleeping more than like 5 hours, 6 hours if you don't have your fish. But like once I was completely like qualified, senior rate, blah blah blah, and I'm like a senior second class that's qualified, all the things I need to be. Yeah, everybody just left me alone. They're like, yeah, as long as lunch is good, nobody's got anything to say to you. Like my chief would like occasionally need some like paperwork done or whatever, but like, yeah, I wasn't charged with doing anything other than my primary duty. That's not real anymore. Everybody's got something extra to do. Even on my last boat as a department chief, like every one of my junior guys had some, even if it was like a little thing, just so I could be like, hey, you're helping, like everybody had something extra outside of their primary duty, big, small, multiple things. And then you've got all the administrative demands, like you were mentioning, of NFAS and all the stupid GMTs and all that. The only time I went to GMT is when they called us all to the mess decks to talk about something, but that was it. There was no NKOs. There was none of that crap. And so like there are demands, whether you want to like act like they're as hard as what you did back in the day or not. It's like there are tremendous demands on sailors that exist now that weren't there when I was that guy. And the demands of my job have not changed at all. Like it's just as difficult to be a submarine galley watch captain now as it was in 2002. But now you also have to do all this other stuff. And it's like, I don't know how they're doing it. And I think you're seeing it reflected in retention. I think you're seeing it reflected in recruiting. And I think you're seeing it reflected in acute mental health issues. Like,
and I think that it is a thing. And I think that if our first line leaders, your LPOs, your chiefs, your senior chiefs, they have this access to the E1 through the E5. It's like that's their gatekeeper almost. Like you're their leader. You're supposed to shield them and protect them from all things that could cause, issues to their career, to their health. And when we're not doing that, then it spirals and it makes the sailor feel like you don't care about them or you don't have their best interest at heart. And I don't think that people, that leaders, right, they're not doing it on purpose. So what would you say to, the E6, the E7, the E8 that may find themselves in a position, where they're trying to just meet the mark, but they don't know how to navigate taking care of their sailors at the same time?
Get hot. Start learning. Like you look at it like the submarine community is very good at training and qualifying people to do what they're supposed to do strategically, tactically, to operate the submarine and get the mission done. So it still baffles me to this day that they don't take leadership development seriously, at least in my community, because we're so hyper focused on just technical competence and proficiency and all those things, right? So you look at it like that. You are at a loss when you're in these positions because you're not trained and qualified to do what you're being asked to do. You are promoted based on erroneous criteria. I'm looking at you as this, can I say your rate? Is that okay? Or do you want me to not? Okay. No, so as a CT, well, I think I did already. God, I should have asked. But so like you as a CT doing what you do, right? I'm going to promote you to chief based on what exactly? Your technical competence, maybe I got to observe you in an LPO role of some form, right? Every community has different requirements for what you need to have. Like maybe you were a shore LPO. In your case, that's probably almost entirely relevant. But like there's a lot of communities where it's like there's exceptions where maybe you don't need to be an LPO. Maybe you can do this instead. So maybe you got a little bit of a leadership role as an LPO for at least enough time to get it on an eval. And then you're promoted to chief. The lion's share of what we use to promote people to leadership positions is evaluating technical competence and an individual's ability to excel in whatever role, like a collateral duty or getting a degree or getting personal awards or doing well on the PRT or whatever, right? It's all individual metrics, and I'm measuring you on your ability to do a thing, right? And hopefully you've been in a leadership position where I've at least been able to get a small snapshot of you in a leadership position. And then we can get into truth and reporting and how garbage the eval system is and reporting that to somebody like me when I'm at a selection board. So the representation I get is false as well. So I'm promoting you based on erroneous criteria to start, right? Where you're not getting leadership development and education. You're not put in roles where I can like robustly evaluate your ability and make sure that not only do you know this stuff, but you're able to actually do it in real life. And then promoting you to a position like chief. I'm promoting you based on, and they say this at the selection board in the briefing rooms. They're like, we're selecting for potential to be a chief petty officer. Like you're analyzing all these documents and you're selecting on their potential to do this job well. So I'm not selecting on documented performance in leadership positions. I'm selecting the people that I think have the best potential to not fail. Like, and that's insane. And so for those people, it's like, get out there and get after it. Like access all of the platforms and the resources that exist, including mine. And like, I was a big Jocko guy. Like I read all the extreme ownership and dichotomy of leadership and listened to his podcast, and that it evolved from there. But extreme ownership, I mean, that spoke to me because that's how I viewed it. But it was a lot of people pushed back against my way of doing things in real life. But then when I read that book, it was extremely validating. I'm like, I'm not wrong. You're wrong, damn it. Like, and I can meet you. Go ahead.
That's so crazy that you said it was validating, right? Because every single day I find myself at work, not every day, but just I find myself in these positions where I'm like, I read this, I studied this is what this book had told me. It makes sense to me.
And everybody's treating you like you're crazy.
not treating me like I'm crazy. Yeah. Or just not like, why aren't we doing it this way? And it's like, well, because we've always done it this way. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, am I wrong for thinking that was the right way to do it? So
you're not wrong. There is a tremendous amount of pride tied up in the identity that people build around being chief petty officers. And I think that's something that needs to be wired into the way that we build chiefs. Is this isn't your identity. This is a thing that you do, right? So like you need to be okay with admitting that you're wrong. And if a chief who has their identity conflated with the idea of being a chief, it's like in order for them to admit that they're doing it wrong, they need to burn their entire identity to the ground. That's not a small ask, right? But if you can successfully separate your identity as a person from this job that you do, and like you're allowed to be passionate about it, like you're allowed to be like, there's a significant part of who I am that was heavily influenced by being, look around the room, like heavily influenced by being a chief, right? And I know the listeners won't be able to see it, but they've seen it before. Yeah, they can't see,
right? But he has all his like chief paraphernalia in the background.
I'm a collector. I'm a historian. I'm all kind of like a hobbyist historian, but like I have chief combo cover anchors over here. I have a case full of like historical submarine dolphins over here. I have all the stuff. It's like a museum in here. And it's very important to me. Like I identify quite a bit with being a chief. Did a lot for me growth wise, maturity wise. Like I learned a ton, but it's not who I am. It's what I did. And as soon as I was out of the Navy, I had somebody ask me if I was struggling with like the transition. And I was like, not really. No. And I think that's the primary reason is I was, and I don't even know why. I think it was because when I saw people whose whole identity, like the meme, like whose whole identity is being a chief and like can't go out in public without like a chief shirt on or like a Master Chief hat on or whatever. I didn't like it. It grossed me out. And I'm like, this isn't who I am. I'm way more than this. And I think it's okay. And I think that like I had this moment in boot camp. We used to do this thing called Service Week. I don't think it's been real for a long time, but there was a week where you would get detailed to all these different things. It was like FSAing in boot camp, and some quite literally for me, because they were like, "Oh, you're a cook, you're going to go work at the galley." But they also had people like at the drill hall helping the RDCs with all the marching and drill stuff, and then they had some people over at some other place helping them with I don't know. Like there's a bunch of different like places you could go. I think there was like a laundry place. It was just like you were effectively an FSA. And I was one of the, what they call them swabbies at the galley. So like I had a paper hat on and, there's different positions and I became a line captain. And then like, we were just like, we didn't have a lot of oversight. It was really strange. Cause back then, like in boot camp, like the whole time, like you could never escape an RDC. But then during service week, I mean, there were people around that were supposed to be supervising us, but they weren't doing a great job. And the RDCs were off doing RDC things. They would just march us to our place.
My division went to McDonald's when we were in boot camp. So
of course you did. And probably got an hour of phone time every day. And no, I'm just playing. But the story is, so like we were just doing, like we didn't have a lot of supervision or guidance. We showed up. Somehow I became a line captain, which is like the king of the FSAs. Think of it like that. So like, and then when you were on your like last few days, there was like fresh people coming in. And so I'm teaching them how to do what I was doing, high-fiving them like a turnover and leaving. So the way they would do it, you would write something you would write your position on your little white FSA hat every day. And so we would write line captain. And then when it was your last few days, you'd write line captain. And then in parentheses, you'd write retired, like, cause you were on your way out the door. And so it was just a thing. Everyone was doing it. So I just did what everyone else was doing. Cause I didn't know, like I was just trying to conform, which is hilarious because what I got yelled at for, I just got face punched by an RDC, like snatched my hat off my head. What the hell is this recruit? And he goes, "Are you an individual?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's just lost his mind. Because I didn't know. I'm like, "Am I an individual?" I think I'm an individual. Yeah. Like I was terrified. And so like, I said, yes. And he just launched into this tirade about how I'm not an individual. I'm like part of like I'm a sailor in the Navy. Like we're all the same. Like it was basically like that break him down and build him back up concept. I don't think that that's healthy. And I don't think that it's the way to go. And I mean, you maybe in boot camp, like, but as soon as they're out of initial session training, we should be having a conversation about how this is not who you are. This is just what you do, albeit it's an important thing and that you have to take it very seriously and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't think it's a healthy thing to get your identity conflated with the job that you do. And that happens a lot. And so what's really difficult for these chiefs is to have somebody tell them, even me, like being me, right? It's a different thing for you to tell a chief that they're broken. I'm a Master Chief. Like I retired a Master Chief.
I don't do that.
I know. I'm just saying, like, I'm a bit of an authority on the topic. And then even I look to people like Paul Kingsbury. He's right. Yes. But Paul Kingsbury is a retired Fleet Master Chief. He's like objectively and unarguably an authority on all things. He has
published books about that. Yeah.
Right. And he will tell you that there's a ton of things wrong and that people need to like lean into leadership development education, blah, blah.
I've listened to his episode on your podcast. I found it very useful. Yeah.
He's a great dude. He's going to be on again soon, but he's very passionate about this stuff. And so it's interesting to me because he seems like a bit of an anomaly as far as like when he got to that position, he was being kind of vocal about some of the stuff and he got a lot of pushback for it. But yeah, it's hard to admit that you're incompetent when it comes to the thing you're charged with doing, especially when you've been promoted and validated so many times. So, but the ones that are actively seeking it, of which I find there are many, and hopefully there are some that are those types of people that hear me and slowly convert to the idea of like, okay, maybe I have some things to learn. Right. And it's the answer is start training and qualifying yourself. Like, it's not what I would dream up as an answer in a perfect world, but you can do a hell of a lot worse by just sitting there like a bump on a log. Like, get in these books, get in these podcasts, get in these YouTube videos, get in all the things. And I mean, even like, so Andrew that used to do the foundations episodes, and me, like, I was just getting a bachelor's degree on my way out of the military for a thing to put on my resume, and I got an organizational leadership one. And so did Andrew. Andrew, I think, has a master's degree. And so it's like, go study it for real. Like, there's schools that offer this stuff that it's all online, and you're getting in these leadership books and studying military history and learning all these lessons and all these different and there's a certain component of it that, like, I kind of eye roll when you get into like the John Maxwell leadership stuff, like the motivational quotes and affirmations and little like the inverse quotes. It's where they're like, and I really need to get an example burned into my brain for when I'm criticizing this stuff. But they're like, the quotes, it's like a cheeky leadership quote that somebody puts on a meme, and it's just a sentence that's like the mirror image of it. Oh, it's not this, it's the backwards of this that sounds better. And it's like, I could just blow 1,000 holes in it in 5 seconds, but people are they're trying to like market it instead of actually educate. And it's like, you can't educate with if you scroll back on my Instagram, I was doing some stuff like that just to try to drive engagement on Instagram and spread the word. And I did it for a little while, and then it made me throw up in my mouth too many times, and I stopped. But it's even that, like, I'm not a giant fan of John Maxwell stuff, but it's a lot better than doing nothing. It's not like he's wildly off base. Some of the Simon Sinek stuff, I think, is like, he's not wrong about much. I also have a hard time listening to him because, like, what have you ever done? Like, besides write books and talk about, like, great. I mean, he's great at the thing that he's doing, but I just have this hard time. Like, if Jocko speaks, I'm going to listen. And is that fair? I don't know. But like, does Simon Sinek have an education in this? Is he like a PhD in some kind of like, I don't know, like leadership science or like behavioral something or like psychology or whatever? As far as I can tell, he's just a dude that talks about leadership stuff. And it's like, okay, like, but his stuff isn't bad. Like, it's just not my favorite. And that's just a personal me thing where I have a hard time accepting. I always quote Mark Wahlberg because he's like, I don't take fitness advice from anybody that's not in better shape than me. And I'm just like, that's a rule to live life by. I feel like I'm just like, I'm not going to listen to you if I'm in, like, why would I take fitness advice from you if you're not in better shape than me? It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, yeah, it's get out there and start training and qualifying yourself, in lieu of there being the infrastructure that should be there. And that I think it is the organization's responsibility to provide, but in lieu of it not being there, get to work. Like, just do the same thing we do with everything. And it's tough, but it's also like, you can listen to me on your drive to work. Like, you can listen to Jocko while you're working out. You can, like, there's so much you can consume, passively while you're doing other things. So it's not really adding much of a burden. And I would argue that it's probably just gonna, like add value. And there's times where I even feel like scatterbrained because I think I feel like I'm overwhelming myself with inputs because it's like, I got to fill every waking moment with an audiobook or a podcast or whatever. And it's like, sometimes I, like, recently, in probably the last 6 months, I've started to just be like, I'm going to drive in silence. Like, it's like almost meditative. Like, because I already have a hard enough time focusing, and like I sleep poorly, and I have all these other issues. So it's like, I got enough working against me without adding to it by doing those things. And that's what happens is I start to feel like scatterbrained and distracted, and I can't focus and I can't remember things. And so it's like, find that balance, but also you can do a lot of this while you're doing other things. And I find that it works pretty well. It's definitely
sometimes you just gotta ask. You just gotta ask
that too.
For help. You gotta ask where to go.
That too.
And the answer is, either talk to somebody that has the experience, listen to a podcast, read a book. But yeah,
right.
It's
and
there.
Interact
it's out there
too. Interact. Like, find mentors that aren't local. Find people like me that you can reach out to me, and I'll send you an email, do a podcast on your situation if it demands it based on because I think it was it you that said I did a podcast on a situation you were in, or was it someone else?
No, I think it wasn't me.
Okay, it was Ariana, I think.
Yeah.
Which her name's already out there, so I can say that out loud. We'll talk about that offline because I was going to mention it before we started recording, but yeah, I think there's a lot of interaction that can happen that people don't go out of their way enough to go find, for lack of a better description, like their tribe, right? Like there are people out there that can help you. You just got to go find them, and they're not as far off and rare as you think. They just might not be like within arm's reach inside your shop or your command, right? But they're there. I promise you they're there.
Which is why like platforms like this is awesome, because you're getting to hear a bunch of different people's perspective and their willingness to provide support.
Right. 100%.
Well, so to bring it back towards like mental health and leadership, I will say I want to share a story about a recent interaction that I had with a sailor. So I didn't know this sailor. I actually met him or her on a Reddit post, and the Reddit post was essentially like a cry out for help. And there's a lot of those on Reddit.
They really are.
But this one really was interesting to me because he or she, right, was essentially saying, you know, I know that I need help. I really need help, but I'm scared that this is going to ruin my career. Like, I'm really love being in the Navy, and I'm worried that if I seek care that, you know, they're going to cancel my orders, or they'll kick me out, or I won't be eligible for these special programs that I want to go into. And so I saw that, and I you know, hit that person up directly, and I said, hey, you know, what's going on? Like, as somebody who has been in the Navy for over 11 years and has experience with mental health and, you know, these special communities, like what's going on? So he or she told me that they just re-enlisted, and then they love being in the Navy, and that the problems that they were having were outside of the Navy. Like, it's just stuff that they experienced beforehand. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, well, you're in the Navy now, and the Navy has resources to help you get through this, and you won't be punished for seeking that help. Like, that's what they're there for.
So that
it
you
depends.
Shouldn't be. Yeah, you shouldn't be. And even if you are, who
cares?
The net gain, who cares? Yeah, and the two people, like I'll let you finish, but Jeff Bayless and Jason Thompson are my two favorite examples for that, because like in Jeff's case, exact same situation. Like, he had a bunch of pre-service trauma that was never addressed, and he tried to distract himself by throwing himself into work, and it destroyed him, and it destroyed a marriage, and then it effectively destroyed his career because he was a limited duty officer. Like, he promoted just crazy fast, made chief in like 6 years, and then got picked up for LDO in like 8, and then he's, you know, driving an aircraft carrier in 10, and he's about to make full lieutenant, which is where you're like vested as an LDO, and they can't revert you. And he gets an argument with his wife, and he's been drinking, jumps in his truck, leaves, gets in an accident, gets a DUI, career over, right? They revert him back to chief. They let him retire. So he retires as a chief and goes on to have, like, he's having a very successful civilian career working with the Navy. Like, I forget where, and I don't know that I would even want to put it out there, but he works with sailors every day and gets paid well to do it, because he's an expert on a whole lot of like BM, docking officer things. But then he has a podcast. He goes around and does talks and shares his experience, and has had countless sailors walk up to him and tell them how they saved his life, you know, like they saved their life, you know. And Jason, his experience was wild, where he went from rate to rate to rate. He was institutionalized at one point because of his trauma, and when he came out the other end, like, there was a point at which where they said, yeah, like, we are not going to give you a security clearance right now, but we're going to retain you. And he ended up as a boatswain's mate chief as well, and just sailed off in the sunset. He's living his best life in Michigan now, which is where I'm from.
Yeah, those are both like really good success stories,
Yeah.
and it was heartbreaking, right, for the
Right.
sailor to feel that way. And
Mhm.
my first question outside of, what's going on was, did you talk to your LPO? Like, did you talk
Mhm.
to your chief? Like, do you have somebody that's there
Yeah.
to support you at your command? And
Mhm.
why don't you feel comfortable talking to them? And
Mhm.
in his or her case, it was because he was scared that if he brought it up to his leadership, that they might retaliate and try to get him
Yeah.
kicked out. And it could be because he was just not educated enough.
Yeah.
But I wish that he felt comfortable to go to at least his LPO, or that, wherever he was at, the stigma of him getting in trouble for seeking mental health care
Yeah.
could have been removed. Because I just hate, like, then he got even more real with me, he or she, as the conversation went on, and
Mhm.
they were just like, if I don't get help soon, then I'm scared that I'm going to hurt myself.
Yeah.
And I said, you need to talk to your PCM, and
Mhm.
if it's really bad, you can go to the ER. And if you don't want to do that because you just refuse, like, at least reach out to Military One Source and
Mhm.
see if
There's
there's a civilian
telemedicine
provider
too,
that you
like, yeah.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I gave him a list of resources that he or she
Good.
could use, and I hope that it helped. But it just hurt my heart that he was so
Yeah.
scared to seek
Yeah. And
care, and that he didn't have the support that he should have had.
yeah, and some of that's probably an irrational fear. Some of it may be leadership incompetence installing a fear that it's not as real as they think. Like, yeah, if you brought it to some incompetent leadership, would they push back? Maybe they eye roll, maybe they judge you, maybe they even like give you a hard time about it. But you're not going to get run out of the Navy as a punishment for seeking mental health care. That's like, it's such a it's like saying you're going to get run out of the Navy for sexual assault, like being a victim of sexual assault. It's like that's just not real anymore. It's going to get elevated to a point that, like, I mean, I can tell you, just walking the deck plates as a chief on the boat, like, not even as the guy wearing the cookie on a submarine. If I had heard some shit like that, I would have ate all those people's faces and walked that kid up to mental health. And this is pre me getting my own mental health care. Like, that's not, you don't get to play around with that. You don't get to, like, get a vote at all. You're not a mental health professional. You don't know if this is real or not, and you're not qualified to make that judgment, regardless. So it's like, when that stuff comes up, you just go right to the flow chart of, like, okay, what's step one? We're going to get you to your PCM, get you a referral. If it's emergent, we'll go to the emergency room or we'll do something else. And you just go into that mode. Like, you start treating it like someone's physically injured, because it's
Exactly.
like, if they're not now, they're going to be if you don't deal with this properly and you shirk the responsibility that is yours to go find this person help.
Yes.
So that's what kills me about it, is that I fear that this situation is more like a perception of a phantom threat, where it's like, worst case scenario. And I know it's really difficult to deal with, especially at the junior levels, when you're still struggling with sense of belonging to the organization. When people start ostracizing you and treating you like you're weak for seeking out this help, it's really hard to deal with. But when you do that, and again, like, it's probably not even realistic to put this on a person in that position, but it's like, when you get on the other side of it, which I know it's difficult to see when you're in it, everything's infinitely better. Like, the fact that I ended up the way I ended up, like, I'm an infinitely better person. I'm healthier, I'm happier than I've ever been in my entire life. In like, as far back as I can remember, having, like, spent 18 months with a psychologist, and I was on medication for a while for, like, severe anxiety, and, like, it helped in ways I don't even, like, know how to quantify. And I'm an infinitely better person because of it, which is the lessons to be pulled from, like, Jason and Jeff, is like, their situations were, like, so, like, they were so insane, and it would have been so easy for them to give up. Like, it would have been so easy for them to become statistics, but they didn't. And now they're candidly sharing their stories and advocating for this stuff. And it blows my mind every time I hear them talk about it. Like, because it breaks my heart. Like you were saying, like, it breaks my heart to hear that kids are talking about, like giving up, and it's like, at the end of the day, this is a job that you're doing. And if you're in such extremis that you can't do that job, walking away is an option. Like I got on a Reddit thread the other day. I mean, probably about a week ago, and I was trying to articulate it diplomatically, but I mean, what I wanted to say was just leave, go home, deal with the consequences, but at least you're alive and you can get access to mental health care. Like it, at the end of the day, like it's not worth your life. It just isn't. I mean, yes, there are scenarios in the military when we're doing our mission where we consciously, while trying to mitigate as much risk as we possibly can, we risk our lives, and it's a calculated risk, and we understand that that's part of the mission, and I could die. Like, I understand that to be an objective reality of my career field, but it's a risk that we take as part of the mission. I elected to do that going in. Everybody's doing it with me. Share diversity, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, this is a whole different thing. And this is not what the job is. Like, your life shouldn't be at risk when we're not doing the mission. You shouldn't, that's not what we're not losing people in peacetime. This doesn't make sense. So it's like when these situations present themselves, burn the whole thing to the ground if you have to get help, but get help. And I mean, I'm in the unique position to become a megaphone for some of these people, and I'm happy to do so. Like, because there's been a couple situations where I've gotten involved and got a couple of my IDC friends involved and called hospitals and said, "Hey, what are you doing with your life? And why does this person not have an appointment yet?" And then the next day they have an appointment. Like, weird. And that was something I talked about recently on a podcast where it's like, you can fix more of this than you think as leaders if you just engage. And it's generally, especially for khaki wearing people, it's generally as simple as picking up the phone with your, like, what the F face on, or tone of voice in this case. Like, all you got to do is call up and say, "This sailor's been trying to get an appointment for weeks. What is going on?" Or better, show up at that, like, mental health desk and just demand accountability.
Even limit it to the khaki level, because somebody like me,
sure,
I go 100%. Hard for my sailors, and I will scream from the rooftop if I see something that's wrong and my sailors are being affected. I will go to the right khaki if that's who needs to get it done.
And you should. So you absolutely should. And a lot of times, like, what you'll find is if you go in that role, right? So, like, you walk into the hospital, into the mental health floor or whatever, and you're like, "I want to see somebody wearing khakis right now. And, like, my sailor's been waiting and they're in extremis and they need an appointment right now. And don't tell me that you don't have time," and blah, blah. And, like, you're freaking out about it. You're going to get a concerned chief coming out going, hey, what's going on? Like, what are we doing? And they're going to find out about it. And it's going to be some type of failure in the system or some type of thing that chief can use their sphere of influence and power to just fix immediately. And it's like, that's why I keep telling people, like, it's been a thing recently where I'm just like, just engage. Just worst case scenario, they say no, and then you can elevate it and you can do all these other things, and you can look at alternative mechanisms to get them to, like, plug the gap while you figure out why the hell they don't have an appointment and why there's such a backlog and everything else. But not engaging isn't, like, it gets you nowhere. And it's like you just shrugging and saying, well, if there's an 8-week wait, there's an 8-week wait. Like, no, unacceptable. Like, get a different answer than that, or I'm going to lose my mind. But yeah, and a lot of times it's as simple as engaging. It just is. Like,
and for, the junior service members or the junior sailors, don't be afraid to ask your LPO or your chief for help, or tell them what's going on. Do not let fear be the cause of you not asking for help.
And if you get that pushback that you were afraid of, let's say worst case scenario that you were dreaming up as you had all that anxiety about approaching your LPO or chief, if it goes horribly off the rails, right? Okay, well, they're not going to help you. That doesn't mean someone else won't help you. That doesn't mean you walking to an adjacent work center. Like, a lot of people will say that E5 and below, like on a ship, right? Like, they could probably very accurately, like, if you had everybody do it, they would probably very accurately rank the chiefs in much the same way they're ranked by, like, the CMC and the command. So if you have that perception already, what's the worst that could happen if there's a chief that you think is like you've heard is great and their sailors love them and they advocate, take care of them, blah, blah, but you don't have a relationship with them. What's the worst thing that could happen by you approaching that chief?
They will help you.
One
of my favorite chiefs is that go to so many sailors outside of her division and department come to her because she's going to help them.
She's going to help. And that's the same thing with me when I was on the submarine. It was like, I was the one that was going to get you what you needed and get and advocate for you and get you the help. And I was very institutional expertise focused. Like, not that I was bad at my job, but I was more focused on the ways that I can help sailors for it to be like meaningful and long lasting is institutionally, like by having expertise in the programs that like they would go to admin for help with a pay issue and admin wouldn't even know what the hell they were talking about a lot of the times. And it's like, oh, well, joke's on you nerds. I read the book. And so then we go to war.
Pulled up, the CPPA manual and called DFAS and done all this stuff.
Yeah, I can read too. So it's just, you or like eval issues. I've submitted BCNRs on behalf of sailors to fix their records and get them paid money they were owed and all these things where a whole bunch of other people had told them, no, that's not real. You can't do that. You're SOL. Like you can't just deal with it. And it's like, no, I'm not going to just deal with it. Like you need to get this sailor an answer or some type of adjudication for the issue that they have. And that doesn't just apply to mental health. It applies to everything. Like it's unacceptable to me that a leader just lets things lie with like I forget who I was talking to, but it was like a thing where I had a sailor screen for the White House. It got shut off. All it took was me calling and asking a question. That was it. And then everybody threw rose petals at my feet when she got selected to go to the White House. I'm like, why? I just did what I feel like everybody in my position is like duty bound to do. And it wasn't like I put a whole ton of bandwidth and effort into it. I just picked up the phone and called a master chief and said, hey, what's going on here? And they told me, and I'm like, oh, I can fix that tomorrow. And we sent them an email with all the documentation they required and a couple of sign-offs by like the detailer and somebody else. And that was it. And it was turned back on. And then she got selected and she went. And it's like, that wasn't even a little difficult. Like all I did was talk to another chief and it really can be that simple. But my CMC was coming to me going like, most people would have just let that lie and taken the answer of you were dropped from selection from the people screening for the White House. And I'm like, yeah, but why? Like, why is that a thing anyone's willing to accept? Like if I had called them and they gave me a really great answer for why her screening had got shut off and why it wasn't going to get turned back on, then at least I can tell her. And that was all she was asking for. It was like, I just don't understand what happened. They wouldn't tell me why. And I found out why. And it was the reasons were crap. And it was like simple things that I could prove were not true, turned it right back on again. And then she got selected. So it's like, it's not difficult and it's not something that I feel like is above and beyond at all. Like that's just a basic ABC duties and responsibilities of a leader. Like that. And so many people are willing to just sit there and I go back to like the freezing thing that we talked about earlier. And that's what it feels like. It's almost like in absence of knowing what to do, they just do nothing. And that is so wildly unacceptable to me. And it should be acceptable to everyone else. But I also don't know that they have the recognition that that's even what's happening. So,
and if you encounter one of those, just go to the next person.
Yeah.
And if they don't help you, go to the next person.
Right. There's someone that will help you. And it's like, they're like, and sometimes like I'm probably a lot more than I'm even aware of. It's like somebody like you is going to be the gateway to somebody like me. And it's like, cause you know which chiefs are the ones to go to. And that, so you can be like, okay, go talk to this person, do this thing, talk, like, I'll help you, like, and I'll hold your hand. We'll go into the office. Okay. Now like talk to this chief. And then now they have like, you're like the gateway to that relationship that they didn't have with that chief that will advocate for and help them.
Right. And I'm so happy to do it.
Yeah. And a ton of people in your position are. So it's like, you just got to go looking for it. And like we were just talking about before, like connecting with people via the forums that exist, like Reddit. There are a ton of just like advocate chiefs that on Reddit that will get after it for you. And I've had some of them on the podcast. And then like, for me, like I've developed this whole second network in parallel to the end of my career. And then even post career, like I'm developing this just huge network of people that I have access to that I can help sailors by leveraging that I would have never had I not done the podcast. Like I had my own network from my career, and it was pretty solid. Like I got some stuff done where I had just connected with these people all over the place. But a lot of the time, more often than not nowadays, the connections I'm using to help people are people I've gotten to know from the podcast, and connecting with them through Reddit or through social media or through, they emailed me when they found the podcast or whatever, or got recommended to me by somebody else. And I emailed them and said, hey, come on. And then, a lot of these people I consider like good friends now. And it's just like, yeah, there are so many ways to do it. And one of the mechanisms is, and I think it's a pretty powerful one, is like stuff like the forums, like Reddit or a Facebook group or whatever. There's a lot of those out there that have a lot of beneficial points of contact that you can leverage if you reach out. And that's the big thing, is you got to be willing, whether it's behind a anonymous mechanism like Reddit or not. Like, be willing to reach out. Like, they're not going to call if they're in a group called Saving Sailors and they're trying to like help people with acute mental health issues, they're not calling your command if you haven't. You know what I mean? Like they're clearly here for not that reason. And so leverage that. And these are the people you've been looking for. So leverage it and let them help. Cause there's a lot more people out there willing to help than I think junior sailors.
Nobody is alone out here.
Yeah. Especially nowadays.
Yep.
Got a whole podcast dedicated to it now. What else you got?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, right? Leadership is very important and impactful to mental health and the access to care. So as leaders, like you and myself and everybody else out there, we just got to continue to do better. So I'll just open the opportunity now. If you want to get into your own personal seed of triumph to share it with the group, you don't have to.
Yeah,
but
no, totally. I think it's really important. And you caught me on an interesting day, and I'll get to that. But so initially for me, it was like the stress of a 21-year naval career, like really, that laid the foundation. And I was somebody that like burned the candle at both ends. I wanted to promote early. I wanted to be the best all the time. I wanted to do all the things, qualify all the things, whatever. And so I would sacrifice a lot of other things to make that happen. Like a lot of free time, a lot of like I went first boat deployed a lot, but it was probably a pretty typical fast boat submarine experience. Except the first deployment, we launched missiles for Iraqi freedom. So that's not quite that typical, but the rest of it was pretty typical. And then for shore duty, I just went to a naval base, like a sub base, worked at the galley, but I went there to go to culinary school and get out. I was not about a career in the military at that time. I was really angry and bitter and jaded and was not a fan of the organization, much like every other E5 in the Navy, probably, or pretty close. I was that guy. And then I had a chief that read me like a book and basically was like, if I put this kid in charge of people, he will turn on and like become what I need him to be. And I think he recognized some potential in me and stuff too. But, so we had a bunch of A school students come straight to the galley because we were super undermanned and we needed help. And so he works them out with the detailers. So we had a bunch of brand new kids, and he put me in charge of a watch section right as they were showing up. So not only was I like put in charge of this 15-person watch section, but I had probably half a dozen of these new kids as well. So I was like, I was like the dude that needed a haircut and looked like he slept in his like uniform. And so as soon as that happened, I became the super squared away guy with shiny shoes and a set haircut and all that. Cause I couldn't, it was fine if it was just reflecting on me, but then to be in the position of leading these people, I'm like, I can't. And then, so within 18 months, I was, going up for Sailor of the Quarter and all this crap. And, but I also started burning the candle at both ends. I was going to culinary school full-time, working full-time, trying to get my volunteer medal by doing all the volunteer things. I was qualified base CDO and standing duty that I didn't even need to stand. I was like doing all the things, trying to promote, and then made first class and did well on rankings towards the end and won Sailor Quarter at one point and all that stuff. So like I spent my whole first shore duty, with the exception of like the first like 6 months, just getting after it. Like, so there wasn't a lot of like downtime and leisure. And then then in my infinite wisdom, I volunteered. God. All right. So, I'm not sure where I left off exactly, but yeah, so like for me, the like general anxiety, insomnia started happening, on my third submarine. And I mean, I noticed like on deployment stuff, having a hard time regulating my mood. And it got a lot worse on my third submarine. But it was the first time I'd spent like a ton of time doing ship's control stuff, which is, the watch I was standing is called diving officer of the watch. And you're this most senior enlisted watchstander on the submarine, and the way I explain it to people, so I don't have to like go down the rabbit hole of how submarines drive, is like it's like flying an airplane underwater, and it's like I'm not doing it by myself, but I'm the captain essentially, like of the flying part. Like I have the officer deck, like telling me where to go, and then the officer deck controls speed, but it's like I give recommendations and then they give course orders. I don't do anything with that. I just accomplish that by making sure the helm is doing what he's supposed to be doing. And then you're in 3D space, so it's not just left, right, it's up, down, and the ship takes angles because, like, depending on what we're doing, like, you know, if you point the submarine down and add propulsion, it's going to go down, as long as you have to mess with buoyancy, pumping water on and off the submarine, all this other stuff. But the easiest way to explain it is like flying an airplane underwater. And so I'm the guy like supervising the two people that are operating all of the control surfaces, and the guy that's moving water back and forth to control like positive and negative buoyancy. And then you can put weight forward and aft to like control the angle. So when they put me in that position, I didn't deal with it very well. It was like, I was good at it, according to the people that evaluated me anyway. I thought I was horribly like underprepared all the time. And so like I compulsively studied, like I would look at the night orders, like what are we doing the next day? And then I'd be in the casualty procedures and the operating procedures, like just, and the CO's standing orders and everything, just compulsively
Sounds like
studying.
You had like an immense pressure.
Yeah, it was
put on you.
I was very, because like when I would, the next subordinate watch is called Chief of the Watch, and it's very procedural. It's like if this then that. It's very like there's not a lot of gray area at all, and there might be a mechanism of like feeling like you have a safety net because you have the dive, like you have another person above you. But like I could do that and it was fine, and it didn't seem to bother me much. But when I got to where I was standing dive, where it's like kind of like the buck stopped with me, and also I kept getting put in positions where my officer of the deck was like deferring to me for recommendations and advice because they didn't know what the hell they were doing, and it like it freaked me out. Yeah, like, and I get it, like senior enlisted guys supposed to know things, but like the way Cook's career progression on a submarine happens is like second submarine, you qualify Chief of the Watch. Second submarine, maybe, or more likely third submarine, you qualify dive. But it's like most rates, including LSs, which are like, you know, the other side of the coin for supply, is like they spend their entire time driving the submarine for the most part. Not everybody, like sonarmen are in sonar, stuff like that, but a lot of the watchstanders, they spend their entire first tour, like 4 years, driving the submarine, which is a tremendous advantage when you are, because then I'm like effectively the supervisory mechanism for the people driving. And it's like, but I never drove. So it's like, it's a way steeper learning curve, and you never feel like you have your hands fully around it when you don't get to get all that experience and get comfortable in control driving the submarine. Just driving, and like there's a lot of, I used to have like first or second classes that could trim the ship just because they just knew, like it was like an innate thing that they picked up by driving the submarine constantly and just being around when we give all those orders and when we do all those things. So I didn't have that, and so I almost felt like an imposter. Like I didn't even think I should be up there. And I kept telling my cobb that, I kept telling my CO that, and they kept positively reinforcing my performance and saying, no, you're great. You're doing a good job, blah, blah, blah. And so but it never went away. So I was having trouble sleeping. It was the first time I started to have that like fight or flight feeling in my stomach when I was trying to sleep and I couldn't go to sleep because I was so worried about what was going to happen the next day. Sleep issues were already kind of a thing, but they got a lot worse. And then towards the end of that time, so we finished all our deploying. I didn't crash the ship into anything and I didn't kill anybody, thank God. But then at the end, so when we were done deploying, at the very last deployment that we did, I was just in the chief's mess and I was blowing my nose and pressure backed up on the right side. I'm like, well, that's weird. That's not supposed to happen. And I kind of chalked a lot of my sleep issues up to just knowing I had a badly deviated septum. My brother had a similar surgery when he was a teenager. And so I figured, I've just blown it off for a long time. I need to get this fixed. So long story short, went to ENT. They were like, yeah, you got a badly deviated septum. We'll fix it. There's something growing up there. We'll just take that out too, and you'll be good. And then they got imaging back, and they're like, actually, this is more complicated than we thought. We're going to send you to a rhinoplasty at an Army hospital that's more equipped to deal with it. I'm like, all right, whatever. I honestly made me feel better because it seemed like they were a little more, I don't know, skilled or experts or whatever. But I was like, oh, okay, bigger hospital, better doctors. Like I don't know. That's just how I equated it in my head. But then I got there and they're like, oh, yep, benign growth, like and deviated septum. We'll go in there. We'll fix it all at once. Bing, bang, boom. You're done. I come in for the surgery day and I got the IV on. I'm in a hospital gown. I'm about to get rolled back and some Army captain comes out and he's like, actually, we're not going to do the surgery today. We're just going to take a large tissue sample because you might have cancer. And I was like, did you just say to me? Like, it's the first time they ever mentioned that it could be cancer. And there's a part of me that in the back of my mind, I was already thinking about because you say things like benign growth or something's growing up there. In my mind, the way I'm wired, I'm immediately going to worst case scenario. Like I wasn't necessarily like dwelling on it, but like it was just kind of in the back of my mind. So when he said that, I'm like, here we go. And then they took a tissue sample 3 days later. I had cancer. And this was March 2020. So what's going on in March 2020, right? Like COVID mania, like everybody's freaking
right
out.
In the thick of it.
Nobody knows what it is. And it's respiratory. So like this tumor is on my olfactory nerve in my sinus. So it's the worst place it could possibly be, considering COVID is what it is, right? And so they were freaking out. They referred me to a university hospital because it's a very exotic form of cancer. It's like they said, like it was like 1 or 2 in 10 million people, or in 10 million cancer cases, rather. So they weren't equipped to handle it at this Army hospital. They sent me to the university hospital, who had to confirm the pathology with some specialists because it's so rare, blah, blah, blah. But they were like trying to rush me into surgery because COVID, like the rules were changing every day. And they were like, they might shut down the OR and then we can't take it out. And then if we have to wait 6 months, this could, like if it kept growing, I could have lost vision in my right eye and all this other fun stuff. So so I basically found out I had cancer and like 3 days later I was in brain surgery. And so we were freaking out about that. And I was scared of the surgery, not so much the radiation and stuff afterwards, because it's just a grind and it's going to suck and whatever. And I'm like, that's deployment. I'll be fine. But the getting put under and them doing the surgery, that freaked me out because they said, we think we can go through your nose, but it's still brain surgery. Like they're still like taking down the barrier between your sinuses and your brain and remove some brain tissue because a tumor was like growing up in there. And, but they said there's a chance if we get up there and it's complicated or there's something we don't expect, they said, we're going to like cut you ear to ear, pull your face down, cut your forehead out, relax your brain back and go in this way. And I was just like,
oh my God.
And then the surgery went long. So my wife's freaking out thinking that I'm getting my head stapled back together. And it apparently went perfectly. It just took way longer than it was supposed to for some reason, which they never explained. But anyway, so we were just engaged at the time. So panic, like marriage license, go to the courthouse. Mind you, it's COVID. Everything's shut down. Thank God they were amazing. I just sent an email to the court officer or whatever, and they opened up for me. And we got legally married so that like if I die in surgery, like everything goes to her. Like that was the kind of things. I'm trying to process this in 3 days, freaking out, panicking. Like I want to make sure she gets the house and all the things, right? and then all the benefits of like my SGL I would have went to her anyway, but you know what I mean, like all the other things. And so got all that done, went into surgery, everything was fine. And so I get home, and a couple weeks post-op, I'm feeling really good. Better than I have in a really long time, because now I can breathe a lot better. And I was sleeping a little bit better, and I wasn't at work at all either. They just basically, because of COVID, and also they were just stay home and be healthy. Like, just if you need anything, let us know, but just don't even bother coming in. Like, because my primary duty was doing inspections on submarines, and they all got shut down because of COVID. So like we weren't traveling or anything. And so I was just home all the time, and I felt really good, and I was sleeping better, but I was like, super irritable and moody and whatever, and didn't really understand why. And then, so I think it was about 6 weeks after surgery, they cleared me to start radiation. And radiation, like I was doing what's called proton radiation, which is kind of like a fancier, more, it's like a fancier version, but also it's very it's very targeted, so you don't get as much like tertiary exposure that could lead to other bad things. So when I went in, it was like, it sucks, but you're in there for like 20 minutes. Nothing really happens. Like it accumulates over time. And so you get a bunch of gnarly side effects. And like I had sores in my mouth and all this really like gnarly, like bruising, and like it just looked like bad sunburn on my neck and face, and all this the hair loss and all that crap. But at the very beginning, like you go in, you do it, it's uncomfortable because they put this like crazy mesh thing on your face to keep you from moving and all this stuff. But like I felt exactly the same going in and leaving after the first treatment. Right. And that's only notable because I got to my car, because my wife came with me. I got to my car to drive home. As soon as I closed the door to the car, I started just ugly crying, and I had no idea why. Like and my wife is like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, I have no idea what's happening." And it got pushed to the back burner because radiation, right? Like I'm in the middle of that. So the irritability and moodiness and all that crap, plus now I can't regulate my emotions, like at all. Like, I mean, that would happen periodically where I would just fall apart like that. And I didn't know what was happening, but it was kind of like, cancer, radiation. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like it was, apparently there's something going on that I'm not fully aware of, but it's because of cancer. And so we kind of blew it off because I just got more and more, like I was fatigued. I felt horrible. I was in pain. And so like, of course I'm not in a good mood and I'm not fun to be around. But, I mean, I spent most of my day in bed, and then I'd get up, go to radiation, come back, get back in bed, like it was pretty much, that was pretty much the cycle. But then once radiation was over, and like it's like a snowball effect. So like it gains inertia, and then you got to like let that bleed off. So like I stopped radiation, and it took like a month for all the symptoms and BS to go away, or like the gnarly stuff anyway. So then like, I'm 6 weeks post radiation, and I'm still like emotional and snapping at my wife and just being a dick for no reason and stuff. Like it was ridiculous. And she finally is just like, all right, like you need to do something about this. And I hadn't even realized how bad it was until she I just needed her to confront me about it. And I'm based on life experience, I won't, like, it's a rabbit hole I won't go down, but like that's all it took for her, because I'm not ever going to go down a road where, because I'm a moron, I'm going to like blow my marriage up. Like if she tells me I got to do something about this, I'm about to go do something about this right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's what happened. So I went to my IDC. He said, go to your PCM, get a referral, go to mental health. So I started seeing a psychologist. So it was probably about 6 months, and it helped a lot. I was doing really well. I started, that's around when I started doing jujitsu. So, physical health, mental health, everything was trending up. I was feeling really good. And it was, exactly 1 year ago today. So it was Friday night. So it would have been last night is when I recognized I just got done with like day 5 that week of jujitsu, which is it's really difficult physical training. And I was sleeping better, and I remember being at the gas station after jujitsu, and I felt amazing. Like my body felt good. I had energy, and I'm like, I just got done like simulating killing grown men and them trying to kill me for an hour, and I just felt incredible. And I remember it vividly. Like I felt so good, and I'm like, oh my God, this is working. The next morning, I got a phone call that my brother and 2 nieces were killed, and it wasn't. And I don't want to go to the details because I'll be a blubbering mess. But like the way I describe it, because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, is it was not a traditional, like, traditional is the wrong word, but you know kind of what I'm getting at is like it wasn't like an accident. It was like a true crime documentary. Like it was the way that it happened, and there's just still a bunch of stuff we don't know, and so that it like compounded everything. And so like right as I felt like I was cresting a hill, it just all got blown up and got way, way worse. So that was exactly a year ago today was when they were killed. I didn't even realize it until a few hours before we started this, because my wife asked me last night. We were kind of talking because we knew it was coming. Like my brother's birthday is the 11th. I'm almost positive. And so I remember vividly, like it was almost his birthday. Like it was his 42nd birthday. It was like, it was about a little over a week after when it happened. And then my nieces were 16 and 9, and I knew it was coming because it's early February, but I'm the type that like I don't want to remember what day that happened, but I know my mom, who's very similar to me in a lot of ways, but I know she has that date burned in her brain forever, and she sent me and my wife a text today. And it was just like one of those like, you're just in our thoughts and we love you, and vice versa, and so I was like, oh, it's today. Like, okay, I was like, I knew it was like. I thought it was between the 4th and the 6th, and I was just like, I know it's like one of these days, but it was something like I don't want to, like I don't want to remember that day. I remember them on their birthdays, and I remember like things we did and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to remember it this way necessarily, but yeah, the irony was just I got that text today, and then I knew I was going to end up talking about it once my phone reminded me that I was doing this today, and I was just like, yikes, it's going to be. It's going to be a thing, but it's good though. Cause like I like I'm not as equipped to talk about my brother and the girls as I am like my anxiety, insomnia, and all that other stuff. But it still helps to like talk about it, generally, because like I'll never know what happened. And that's what's so ridiculous. And when we stop recording, I'll tell you as much as I can without ugly crying. But like this way the situation happened, it's like I'm never going to know what happened or why it happened. I just know that they're gone, and it doesn't make any sense, and I'll never be able to put the puzzle pieces in the right way to at least be able to know what happened, so that I can then start trying to like cope with that. It's like I almost just have to compartmentalize it and just accept that I'm never going to know, and that in certain types of ways, it doesn't matter, because my brother was who he was, and I loved him, and he was a great person, and my nieces were amazing. And it's like, so whatever happened that night, it's just like, it doesn't matter, like, because it doesn't change everything that happened for 42 years before that in my unqualified analysis, and like the things I talked to my psychologist about. But so then when that happened, it was like my whole life exploded. So completely off the rails. Like couldn't sleep at all. Like couldn't control my emotions, just like the whole thing all over again, but way worse. And so that's when, psychologist immediately put me on Limdu, went to a psychiatrist. They put me on Zoloft for, because at first it didn't do anything for the anxiety, but my mood improved, which is apparently how that works. Like lower doses improve mood. And then, so they upped the dose after they saw that I didn't have like gnarly side effects. And then once they upped it, I think it was the second time, it started to like it took the edge off of the anxiety. Like it wasn't gone, but it helped me. It like brought it down to a threshold where I think like therapy and other tools like reasonably managed it. And so, yeah, a year later, I stopped therapy, leaving the military with the goal of like, I was in a pretty good place, and my therapist was kind of like, so what's this transition going to look like? What do you think you need? That kind of thing. And we had a conversation. I'm like, I feel like I'm in a pretty good place. I know I have access to care for the rest of my life. So it's like, if I'm wrong, I'll just go access care again through the VA, because that's a transition I needed to make anyway, because I was retiring. So I was like, I think I'm going to try to not do it, at least for a period of time. And I was in a good enough place too, where they gave me a 90-day supply of the meds leaving the Navy. And I talked to my psychiatrist about it. It was just like, so I think like when I get towards the end, I'm going to like wean off of it, because I was really adamant about not being on this for the rest of my life if I can help it. And so I between all of the things that I know I should be doing and that I try to do and that I have done in the past to try to get back on track, I would say I'm not where I was the night before in certain types of ways, where like my sleep was doing well, and like the anxiety didn't feel as very present at all. It still happened, but it wasn't like it was under control, like or at a reasonable level anyway. And I just remember feeling amazing. And now it's like, it just depends, like there's days that are not great and days that are pretty good, and, everything in between. And like, I am acutely aware of it all the time, in that, like, I know I need to be doing certain things. Like, I know I try really hard, even though it's funny I'm saying this out loud right now, because I failed really hard to do it last night. I was up till like 3 a.m, but it's like, go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. Like, sleep hygiene stuff is big for me, because I have like all the things working against me. Like, I have both kinds of sleep apnea. I have the insomnia and anxiety problem. I have like all of these issues that are conspiring to keep me from sleeping and keep me from doing all the things that help with the other stuff too. But definitely in a way better place. But what's interesting to me about it is, it was my reaction to cancer was like, of course I have cancer, and part of that's the nihilist in me, but part of it is it felt like I didn't feel like at any point, except for the brain surgery part, that just there was an irrational fear mechanism there. But like, I mean, well, it was probably pretty rational actually, but you know what I mean. But I didn't think it was like going to kill me. Like, I thought, this is a really difficult experience I'm going to have to go through to learn something. And so it's like, I looked at it almost like, yep, this is going to suck, but I'm going to come out on the other end of it better. And I did, in a lot of ways. Like, a lot of the reasons why I'm as physically healthy as I am is because that got fixed. Right. And, had it not, I would have had all these other issues, but also like just quality of life and my ability to breathe through my nose. So now I can do like fitness and sleep better and all the stuff that I couldn't do at anywhere near the capacity I can do it now. And then those things all feed into me sleeping better and doing all these other things. I'm still not where I need to be, even with just like my CPAP compliance. Like, I have trouble falling asleep, and that's like the first thing to go so that I can get to sleep. If I can't fall asleep with it on. And I mean, there's a bunch of other things that I do to try to, I don't know, address those things. And it's like, it's kind of, it's very much a waveform nowadays than it was like back then. It just seemed like I just kept trending up. And then that happened. Now it's very much like this. Like yesterday, there was a point right before I went to jiu-jitsu anyway, cause I know it'll help, but I like just wanted to like, I started getting anxious for some reason. I don't even know why. Like, I don't have anything I can point at. I just started to feel like I just want to crawl in a dark hole and like, just leave me alone. And so I laid down in bed for like 20 minutes under the blankets, just like sitting there and I set an alarm, and then I got up and made myself go to jujitsu, and I felt a lot better after I went. And so I know there's like those things, and there's going to be up and down days. There's going to be times like, when I went home for the funerals in February last year, and my mom, being my mom, just has these boxes full of pictures, and she had them divided up by, I have 3 brothers. So divided up by son. Right. And, so I went through all of them and like took some pictures out. But I wanted more pictures than I had of my brother and the girls. And so I bought a bunch of picture frames, and I had gone to I'm like a antique person. Like I go to like those shops and try to find cool stuff. And so I found these like vintage picture frames that I thought were really cool. And they're very like my wife's style as well, even though I thought they were cool. And so like I got them, and I'm like, I came into like this office I got the box of pictures and stuff over here. I tried to start putting pictures of them and just melted. Like it was, and I tried to walk out into the, living room area, dining room area, and I didn't even make it. I was going out to the garage to grab I'm addicted to kombucha and like all this. I just went to go do something else and didn't even make it to the door, and like collapsed and was like ugly crying, and my dog's like licking my face, like what's wrong? Mm-hmm. And it's like, so there's days like that also where it's like it just comes in waves and you don't expect it. And I thought I was in a place where I could do that, and because I have pictures on the wall, like that was one of the first things I did after it happened, was I got some pictures and some picture frames, and I have this little like photo collage right outside this door as you leave the office. So I see them every day. Like it's not like, but for some reason it was like I saw it was all these new pictures and all these memories and all the things. And so it's like those things happen, and then the anxiety things happen. So it's very much a waveform, good and bad days. But what's strange to me about it though is like it's so bizarre. Like the version of myself that I am now, I'm so much happier with than I ever was, like who I was before any of this happened. And so in this really strange way, and I, obviously like, I don't wish that, like, I'm not happy any of these things happened. Like I didn't want to go through cancer. I obviously didn't want to lose those people, but like, I don't know, like there's something about, and that's why I've become such an advocate for mental health care. I was always the like, F the stigma, go get the help if you need it guy before I even engaged in any type of care myself. But then when I went through it all myself and like had to overcome that anxiety, I came up in a Navy where you didn't do this. Like it was like a cop out. You were a quitter. Like we had this culture on submarines where they call it tapping out. Like, oh yeah, that guy tapped out. Or they call it going sad as well. That's another one that you'll hear in the submarine forces.
Yeah, I've heard, kind of some of the old timers say that too.
Yeah, and that's the culture I came up in. So here I am, this master chief going over to, I was a senior chief at the time, and going up to my master chief IDC going like, okay, what does me accessing mental health care look like? And I was like nervous and intimidated, and I'd overcome all that like baggage from before where everybody was telling me this is what quitters do, even though I was the guy also saying the things you're supposed to say, like, advocating for the care. And so now I remember talking to Jason and Jeff before any of this, like this was before cancer and stuff. Like I did those podcasts with them, and I remember being so freaking impressed with them. Like there's such a depth and breadth to their character and like their perspectives on things. And they're so in touch with like who they are, good, bad, and ugly, and like what that means and like how they can learn things from it. And I just remember being blown away by how in touch they were with like who they were and their strengths and weaknesses and all this stuff. And then like having gone through all this stuff now, it's like I feel like I'm that guy now. And like and it sucks. The scar tissue sucks, obviously, like you because it never goes away. Like that the thing that you're dealing with, like it's never going to be gone. Like, and even like cancer, like I have all these tertiary symptoms or like issues that will never go away, like shooting pain in my jaw. Like I got to do these saline rinses with my sinuses. I got tinnitus hilariously for military people. I got tinnitus from doing radiation. So like my ears ring constantly, but it's not because of any like noise exposure. It's because I got cooked from the neck up. All kinds of crap that just like, it'll never go away. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be a thing I have to deal with. And it'll always remind me that like that happens. And like, I'm like probably going to get like cataracts in the next 10 years and like all this just crap that's going to happen because I got my face blasted with radiation. So I don't know, like for me, like it's this weird, like evolution that I didn't like. I never saw it coming, even though I knew there was things I would need to learn. I didn't see like a whole new version of myself and like a whole, because I mean I fancied myself a pretty mature, like world traveled, mildly educated person. Like I thought I was pretty, like I thought I had done and seen a lot at that point, and had matured to a level where it's like not that I didn't think more wisdom and experience from life would come, but I didn't think it'd come like this. And I didn't think it would change me the way that it did. And I sure the hell, like if you had told me ahead of time what was going to happen, I would have been like, that's going to destroy me. That's not going to help.
Exactly. Like,
anything.
how am I supposed to come through this? Yeah.
Right. I don't, and I still am like, I mean, it's still processing obviously, but I feel like I'm largely through it. Even though there's, it's never gone, but like, yeah, I'm in a bizarre way, way happier with the person that I am now than who I was before any of this stuff happened, which is why I continually, advocate for like, don't just access mental health care, burn everything to the fucking ground if you have to get at, like, you lost your 5-day-old military career? Who cares? You're still here. You're going to be better on the other end of it. I guarantee it. It's like, go engage with this, demand the care that you're entitled to, and really engage with it too. Like I had a lot of great people. One of them, she was my prior A school student. She attended my wedding, saint of a human being. She sent me this book on like processing trauma, and was telling me like, okay, she was basically like coaching me through my mental health journey because she had a bunch of mental health issues. And she's like, you don't have to settle for your first therapist. You can go, and if you don't like them and they're not the right one, you just tell them you want a new one. And she was like my mental health mom, even though she was.
I went through 3. There was one that the Navy gave me, and he sounded like a total surfer bro. And like he was like reading straight from the textbook. I was like, no, sir, God. This is not going to work.
I got so lucky because I walked in. Shout out to Lieutenant Maxwell Anderson. Yes, I just doxed you. Great dude. I walked into his office. He looked like he was 12 years old. I'm like, this is not going to work. And I'm like a bit of a mama's boy, so I kind of thought a female therapist might be better. But I walked in and I'm like, just give him a chance. Give him at least one full session. And he was amazing. And I loved it. Never after the first few sessions, like I remember, it was the second one. I walked out, and it was a sunny day, and I walked out, and I had somewhere to go afterwards. I don't remember where, but I remember I just walked out. I felt lighter. I felt like I had just taken off a weight vest. I was smiling for no reason. I was like, what is happening? Like, it was so weird because of where I had been at. And I'm 2 sessions in, and I'm not saying it's going to be everybody's experience, but just I wasn't doing anything, and all of a sudden I was doing something, and I was doing something with a therapist that was really great at his job. And so it just, and I told my wife about it when I got home. I was like, it was so weird. I was just smiling for no reason, and I felt lighter, and like I had almost like a pep in my step. It was so strange because I am not that dude. I am not a cockeyed optimist. I am not somebody that is traditionally going to react that way, but that's just what happened, and it was amazing. And he was a great therapist. So and I say that a lot, like I got spectacularly lucky, not just with like the timeline of me getting access to care, because I am under no illusions that somehow there was some privilege involved where somebody decided that like I needed access quicker. And I have a feeling my buddy that was the Master Chief IDC put me on the top of a pile or something, but it could have been a bunch of other things, but I got really quick access to care, like a couple weeks after the referral. And I got really lucky with just catching the right there. Like I just got the best guy they had. I mean, and he was amazing. And then same thing happened with some other stuff where I've recognized that I've gotten either spectacularly lucky by chance or spectacularly lucky that people were looking out for me. I didn't even know. It's not like I would have never asked to be at the front of the line because I'm a Master Chief or whatever. It's like, that's not a thing that, like, yeah, I need to see somebody, but I could have waited. Like there's people that probably need it faster or whatever. Because I wasn't in that place that I was a year ago today, right? Like at this time, it was just anxiety and moodiness and stuff. So like I could have waited a little bit. It would have been fine, but not that you should have to, but the reality, you know. So yeah, that's, hopefully that wasn't too rambly. Like I'm not great. I kind of lose some of my ability to articulate some of this stuff when I'm talking about myself and these experiences for.
No, I think that was great reasons. And like really beneficial for the audience to hear, because you were hit by like two blows, like really close within each other. Yeah. And the fact that, you know, your message is that you're better for it is so powerful, because I feel the same way. Like I don't want what happened to me to ever happen to anybody else, but it made me into a different person, and I'm grateful for that person. So yeah.
Yeah. That is my seed of triumph. Boom.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Thanks for doing this as well. I like probably too early on to gauge any kind of a meaningful response, but people are listening. I can tell you that. Like you've got probably 400 downloads on the 2 episodes so far. So
oh wow, that's crazy! Wow,
typical for podcasts within the first 24 hours for me is usually like like 2, 3. I mean, it depends on what it is and how interested. Like the Beards one will probably be big, you know. Like, but yeah, I mean, people are listening and it's out there in the ether now. So like, I think you'll see a snowball effect, and I can't imagine it's not going to be like very positive for a lot of people. So, and
well, if it just reaches one person, yep, you know, that's 100%. All I can hope for. Yeah.
100%. I think you'll find that over time, it'll do a whole hell of a lot more than that. And so like, I'm very thankful that you're willing to do this, because it's super important, and it's something that I've wanted to focus on for a while now. And I just, you know, at some point I needed to like force multiply myself, because I'm just like,
here we are.
Yeah, and here we are. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this as well. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. All right, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Seeds of Triumph. That was your DGUTS podcast host. Don't give up the ship. He has a fantastic leadership podcast catered towards those looking for leadership, mentorship, and really just all things Navy. Please tune in to his podcast as well. And as always, if you are looking for mental health resources, please visit the link in the episode description. And if you would like to contact the Seeds of Triumph podcast, we can be reached at seedsoftriumph.podcast@gmail.com. We'll see you next week. Thanks again for tuning in.
The views expressed by the speaker and all guests are not those of the Department of Defense, United States Navy, or any other government agency. They are strictly those of the speakers who do not speak for any other organization or entity. The speakers are not mental health professionals and do not intend any of the content of this podcast as mental health advice. If you need professional mental health advice, please seek out your closest military or civilian mental health providers immediately.